Now, there are many places that are associated with hauntings. There are many places that are associated with strange goings on and spooky goings on. And today's folk tale is a place called Clapham Wood near Worthing, down south in England. And it is said there are spooky and strange things going on in these woods. So this is a ghost story, but it's also a story that warns you to keep out of the woods and to be careful. Now, a long time ago, in the medieval age, the woods were very important. They provided us with many things, from handles to the beams that build boats and ships and your longhouse. And so woods were managed. The trees were coppiced, whether they was topped or coppiced at the bottom, low down. And then the branches and the trees were managed so that the hazels grew upright. And if you needed a certain curved beam for your longhouse, they would be growing in such a style over a long time, from one generation to the other. But it is said that people that go into the wood at Clapham Wood, a wood by a very busy main road today, they have had strange encounters. From the medieval age, from the times of the Saxons, and then later the Vikings, the Norse warriors, to the times of the Anglo-Normans and beyond. Now one day, a woodsman who was going out in the woods to go and look for some trees to fell. For he was building a outbuilding, a barn, to store his animals. And he needed some good ash and some oak. And so he was hunting the woods to look for the certain woods and the certain trees he needed. And then he would get his axe and mark an X so that he could send out some of his workers to go and fell the trees and bring them back with a horse and cart. A very old tradition. But on this occasion, he took his favourite working dog into the woods with him. And thinking nothing of it, the dog went astray. As often do, there you are, you're walking your dog and your dog gets excited. It goes into a coppice or into another bit of the wood. The dog returns, sometimes with a big stick, sometimes with a dead hare, or whatever it may find and catch. But this instance, the dog did not return. He looked all afternoon for his dog, kept on shouting its name. We don't know the name of the dog, but he kept on shouting it. Come on, boy, where are you? Come on. As you do. And he got so concerned, he went back to the village where he lived, not far away, and went and fetched some men. He said, I lost my dog. It's his favourite dog, a working dog. He used it to manage his sheep, a shepherd dog, a farm dog. And they all went into the wood and they got sticks and looked around. They thought, well, perhaps it's fell down a hole. Because in those times, people had been digging pits for clay, and the Romans had left over lots of old mine shafts as well and workings. But nothing like that was found. They thought, well, perhaps somebody's taken it back to the village, thinking it was a stray dog. They asked around. Nobody had seen his dog. His dog was very well known. The village wasn't a big village. It had a little inn, a mead hall, and quite a few long houses where people lived. And of course, the long houses had fields at the back of them where they farmed and made the food and let the food grow and cultivated the crops. And so the old farmer, he went, again, the next day to look for his dog, but there was no sign of his dog. And some time passed when a woman was out with a young child and her favourite dog, because dogs has given us companionship for as long as we can know and go back in history. We tamed them and we used them as our pets. Some were working dogs and some were just there to have around the house. And she too was out. She was walking with a small child and she had her favourite dog. And the dog went into a wood, another wooded area, a little coppice, and that dog disappeared. Another year passed, and that dog was never found as well as the other dog. When an old man, you used to go around and delivering messages to people. If you wanted a message delivered to one of your kin, a few villages down the road, that was his job. He would take, your messages. He could even write, which was a skill in those days, because not everybody could read and not everybody could write. And of course, parchment and paper was a very rare thing. So sometimes he would write on clay little tablets, sometimes on a bit of wood, and some days he would remember the message. And so that's what he did for a living. He delivered messages. He was a messenger. A very old tradition. And he was out with his old shepherd dog. He used to be a farmer. He's handed his farm to his oldest son, and now lives on the farm because he's done his work, he's done his bit. And he went out, and the dog started acting strange. He started running around in figure of eights. He kept on barking at that thing that weren't there. And he looked down at the dog. He picked the dog up, and the dog wasn't the normal dog it used to be. It wasn't itself. It looked like it was somewhere else. He looked into his eyes, and the eyes were all red. He thought, well, something spooky's going on here. This is strange. Never had this before. And he was an old man. He'd had many dogs, so he knew about looking after a dog. He thought, well, I'll take the dog back and we'll go and see the old blacksmith in the village. He's a wise old man. He knows about healing and the herbs and the plants. He knows about animals. And so he took the dog home. But the dog couldn't walk anymore. His back legs had gone, like they were paralysed. And so he had to go and fetch the blacksmith. He went over, wasn't too far away, just down this road. He knocked on the door of the blacksmith. Said, hey, it's me from, over yonder. I've got a problem with my dog. Do you think you could spare some time and come and have a look? And the blacksmith said yes. In the old days, we often saw the blacksmith for our ailments because they was wise people and they knew the ways of medicine and the plants and the herbs. So a few hours later, the blacksmith came along and he saw the dog, and the back legs were paralysed and his eyes were completely shot red. He thought, well, this is strange. Where you been? Oh, I said, I've been to Clapham Woods, just over yonder way, along that old path, the old dirt road. And he said, oh, he says, that's a very spooky and strange place, is that, he says. I've heard many a tale from the past about dogs and people disappearing there. And said, it's not looking good, this isn't. So he said, I'll tell you what I'll do. He said, I'll pick the dog up and I'll take it back to my longhouse, and me and my wife will try to get it healed for you. That's the best I could do. I'm feeling sorry for the old man. He said, I won't even charge you a penny. He said, we'll take your dog back and see if we can get him right. So the blacksmith took the dog back in his arms because the dog couldn't walk anymore. His front paws and legs were working, but his back legs were just paralysed. It wasn't like that in the wood. It walked back home to the village with the old man, the dog owner. But as soon as he got in the longhouse, the back legs just went. He was dragging them around his body. A very terrible thing to see, especially if you're a dog owner. And so the blacksmith, he went home, told his wife, so we got to look after and get this dog right. But everything they tried all the herbs and the plants. They prayed to the White Christ, because in these days, in the medieval age, everybody was a Christian. They got the local vicar around, the local priest, and he said some prayers over the dog. So, in the name of Jesus Christ, may this dog get better. But the dog never got better. It stopped eating, and after 3 or 4 weeks, the dog died. Another spooky going on. And so throughout time, it is said that the woods near Worthing, the Clapham Woods, are haunted. And we go much further in time, back to the 18th century. It was around the year 1700 when an old lady was out picking some herbs and plants from the woods. It was getting late afternoon, early evening, and the sun was setting. But then she saw something very strange. She saw something supernatural. For there was a big moon shape, a bright ball of light, not in the sky, but in the wood. And it was moving and hovering around the wood, a big ball of light. At first she thought it was the moon, but as she got closer, it wasn't, and she got very scared, and she dropped a wicker basket with the herbs and the mushrooms and the plants she'd been collecting and ran back to the village. The villagers got the spears and got all the weapons amended and went round the village and gathered people to go to the woods to look for this strange, mysterious thing. Of course, some of them had axes and some of them had muskets at that time in history. For spears were still being used to hunt and fish. And so they went round the wood and they could not see this bright ball of light. Some people said, well, she's telling tales. But other people said, oh no, she's a wise old woman, why would she lie? It's got to be the truth. If she said she's seen something mysterious, then it's got to be true. And again, we go much further in time to the modern age, in the 1970s, where people had dogs disappear in very much the same circumstances. There was a postmaster who was walking his favourite shepherd dog, and that disappeared. There was a lady with a pram and a little baby with a dog, and that dog disappeared. And another lady whose dog got paralysed and got put down because the vets could not do anything. And then there were stories of people seeing strange flying craft, UFOs, as we used to call them. And in fact, people from a UFO research group came along in the 1970s, around about 1973. And they went along, they had devices, they had a Geiger counter and they had compasses. And at one point the compass turned 45 degrees from north, which they could not explain. And another man said he'd been walking through the wood all day and he was retracing his steps. And on the floor he found a massive footprint. The front of the footprint looked like a wild creature, but the back of the footprint looked like a heel. And he said it was the length of two of his hands put together, 12 to 14 inches. To me, it reminds me of the Bigfoot encounters we find and have in the UK, which people see and hear. So whether it was that. And then he was walking down a path in this wood, and in the distance he saw a giant, murky-looking, shadowy figure. A tall figure. He thought, well, is that the figure that's left the footprint? But then something very spooky happened then. For a metal circular disc appeared above him, and the creature just disappeared. So yes, the woods, Clapham Woods, a very spooky place. And perhaps one day when we go to locations on the channel, we will go there in the daytime and film a video and tell you this story. For folk tales may go back in history a long time, but some of the places in the folk tales, some of the spooky goings on are still happening today. And even to this day and age, in 2025, people are having spooky things going on in this woods. It is also associated with Satanism as well. But that is another story for another day. So if you've enjoyed this story, like you love a Dane axe and a great axe, then give it a like and leave a comment. And if you know of any spooky places that you'd love me to tell a folk tale from, then I urge you to leave it in a comment. And until we meet again, don't be scared, be brave, but be careful when you're walking in the woods, for you never know who's behind you, and you never know what strange encounters you may have. It's goodbye from Groggy, it's goodbye from me, and my singing Dane axe with a handle from a tree.